Hi guys, it's Ray with Ray's Turquoise Turtle. Welcome back to Ink Week. Today we are going to start a Shipwreck Tumbler. I'm going to do it my way. I haven't really watched how a lot of these are done, and I haven't done one yet. So we'll see how this works out. So I have my chippy brush that I like to do my wood grain with. And I'm going to try and go with a little bit lighter colors to start. So I'm going to use Tim Holtz Caramel, and I'm going to use my Pixis Spice for the top part. And I'm going to do this just like I would a normal wood grain. This is a 30-ounce traditional from Maker Flow. So I'm just going to do like the entire top up to the curve, like up to here-ish. If it rolls down a little bit, it won't be the end of the world, but just so you know where I'm at or headed with this. Same technique I do for my wood grains. I feel like this spray paint might have been a little glossy, so it's going to look a little different than when I do a wood grain on a more matte finished paint, but it should be fine in the long run. It's okay if I have a little bit of white showing through on this coat, because I am going to go back over it with another coat of the next color. And when you do a wood grain with a chippy brush like this, you will splatter everywhere, so protect your work surfaces, wear your gloves. Don't flick it towards yourself and your clothing. If you can help it. I'm just turning my brush sideways so I don't go as far down the edge. Okay, so I think I'm good with that color for the moment. And I just keep going with the same brush. And repeat the process, focusing on the parts I left white on the first round. And this color isn't all that different, it's just slightly different, which is kind of what I wanted, because I do need to be able to use the darker color for the lines in a minute here. And I don't believe I've used any of these Pixis inks yet for a wood grain, so. And I may come in with just a touch of a slightly darker color, just to age and weather it a little bit more. So I do think I'm going to do that. I'm going to come in with yet a third color. I'm going to use the Pixis Cocoa. which is just more of a chocolatier brown. The goal is to make sure all of the white is covered. Make sure you get your top edge. Most of this lip is going to get covered with the blues, but I do kind of want it somewhat even to begin with, so. Okay. So, that is step one of the ship part. Now, there's a couple of ways you can do the lines. I think this is a black alcohol ink marker. It's got a very fat tip, and it's got a finer point. I think I'm going to try and use this to do my lines. To make the boards. I don't think I want to try and paint it on with a dark color. So what I'm going to do is set my cup. Trying to decide how big I want them. I'm going to set my marker on something and just try and hold it. Yep. Set my marker on something and try and hold it still, sure. It's kind of sticky to try and draw over the ink, so I'm not sure that this method is going to work especially well. Just because the ink is so fresh. I might be able to blend some of these lines back out. Because my other option for drawing the lines is kind of, I'm going to go ahead and do it on here. It's kind of to take a darker brown or a black and paint them on. So maybe I'll try that for one. Just kind of mix the two. But I don't know that that's going to be dark enough, because see, it'll kind of bleed more. So I don't really know that that's the route I want to go either. And I did stick it down to the table there. I don't know what I prefer here. I'm going to go back over this marker though with the paintbrush and see if I can soften it up a little bit. Either way, I think in the end I'm going to kind of end up with the same thing. So I guess I'll just finish with the paintbrush, because I do think that was a little bit easier long run. I should have put my ink in a little cup to begin with. And I'm mixing pitch black and teak wood just to get a dark for my lines. Go over this a little bit more again. Okay, and I'm going to do one more right on that lip. Oops. That'll be fine. The blues will absorb it and spread it. Okay, so that's my that way lines. And then I'm going to go in and break it up some at random. I don't want them to line up perfectly by any means, including going down off of there. Put one more in that row. So that's it for that part. Am I super thrilled with it? It's not bad. I mean, some of it got a little bit runnier than I would have liked, but you know what? I'm not real worried about it. So this is where, on the fine end, if you wanted, you can give it little like nail spots here and there. You don't have to do every single board. You can just kind of do them at random if you want. Because you might not necessarily see them on every single piece of a ship. I think that's plenty of those. But yeah, I think that's I think that's okay. I'm gonna get the caramel dipped in this a little bit. I'm gonna dip it and then wipe it off a little bit. Try and lighten it up again. And I'm just going to go over some of those really rough lines where I feel like I might need to straighten it out a little bit. just soften them back up. The great thing about inks is you really can't mess them up because the alcohol in the ink will keep reactivating your previous layers. So that's one of the reasons I like to work with them. But I think that's good for that part. So I'm going to set that aside a second and switch gears to the blue. Now, I'm going to do the blue a little bit different than you've probably seen the blues done. I'm going to use Pixis, Sky, Sapphire, Lake, and Cobalt. I'm going to put all my tops back on my black or browns real quick. I'm going to do the bulk of my blue on a dry cup and then finish it on the epoxy layer after this has sat a bit. So I'm opening all my blues, and I am just going to use a foam brush. So I'm going to put a dark blue where I had this brown. I'm actually going to wipe some of it away with my glove first. But I'm just going to start layering in my blues. And this is one of their older traditionals, so this one still has the cap on it, not the sticker on the bottom, so I do have the little line to contend with. And I'm not going to forget the bottom. And I'm just going to kind of bring in my other blues as I go. All of my wave action and water action I'm going to do with white on the first layer of resin. So for now I'm just base coating in kind of a swirling water direction. And the blue is going to kind of turn greenish where I get to the top. That's fine. I'm not worried about it. I just don't want to apply so much blue in the first place that it runs into the brown. I want to get the bottom based and then work my way up. See, now I'm going to start. Oh, see, this is what I didn't want to do, and I did it. So I will either have to go back in and try and fix that some, or do some more of it like that, bring a rogue wave high, which I can do, or surprise, that's where my decal will go. And that drip did come off the bottom and run all the way up, so do be careful if you're applying directly to the cup. I do think I am going to bring in another little bit higher. So when I get to my white layer, I'll make sure I come up a little bit more as well there. And I think I'm just going to break this down a little bit more and make it part of the water. There, that'll be fine. So I do want to get rid of that where it left the lines. And now that I picked up some of that dark on the brush, if I go back over the bottom, it's going to mix the brown and the blue and give it a little bit of a green tint, which is absolutely fine. But that's it for that part. I am going to let this sit and dry overnight before I move into the next step of this one, because I do want it to set up pretty well. And hopefully you saw that. Hopefully I wasn't off camera. I couldn't see the camera while I was doing the bottom half. So, but that's the start of my shipwreck. Okay, I'm going to get the next step done on this one. So I'm going to turn this turner on. I'll make sure it's good and level when it spins. I'm going to put a little bit of resin in this cup, and I mean very little. I don't need a lot of white. This resin is pretty thick, but I kind of want it thick because I want it to move, but not move too much. So alright, so then I'm going to get some resin on here. And again, it is thick, so I'm kind of scraping it out. I don't want a super thick coat for this coat, so and if I don't like the way this looks after this round, I can always do another round the exact same way. So I'm just going to start smoothing this on. And I'm going to try and do the shiplap part, the deck boards, whatever you want to call them, all in this direction. Just so if any of the ink does move, it'll move in a way that makes sense. And I know this cup is horribly unlevel right now. I will get that sorted out before I walk away from it. It's actually pushing right off of its football, so. Okay, so that part is pretty good. And now I'm gonna do this part. The blues. This did sit overnight though, so these inks should be pretty well set at this point. Don't forget to get the bottom. And I am stretching this resin pretty thin. Again, I want it to move a little bit, but not a ton, so hopefully I'm doing this correctly. Okay, so that feels pretty well coated. I just want to make sure I get this gap. So I'm just going to let my hand sit here while it spins around with my thumb in that crease. Alright, that feels pretty good. I'm going to push it back on the arm once again. Alright, so I'm going to take this pair of gloves off just because they're too sticky to work with. For the white, I am going to mix Alumilite white resin opaque dye and some of my Pinata Blanco white alcohol ink. It's what I typically prefer to use for waves and such. So I'm going to mix that into here. The Alumilite opaque white. I think I'm getting low. Luckily I only need a tiny bit. Probably time to get an Amazon order in. And my white in my lovely refill bottle. This thing gets used and abused. And I'm just going to mix that up. So it is, again, very thick. And I actually wish that I had a multi-directional turner to do this, because I think I would like to do it the other direction, but I am just going to, kind of in the same direction I swooped those in before, run some lines of wave. And it's okay if the foam goes up on the deck boards. I'm going to make sure I get some on the bottom. I don't want to turn the whole cup white. That's not the goal. I'm going to run a couple that way. Alright, so at this point I'm going to take my heat gun and try and blow some of that. And I did already manage to get this glove super sticky. I'm trying not to wreck my new heat gun, so I'm just going to grab a baby wipe and wipe the glove off a bit. Now that I'm done touching the resin. So I'm actually going to go ahead and hit it with the torch super quick, just so it's a little warmer to begin with. And again, I will fix this level for it to finish turning level. I promise. I won't let it run like this. So my heat gun is a Wagner Furno 550. I love this thing. It has multiple heat settings and it works great. Just knocked something off the table, but I'm going to turn it on its highest fan setting, but I'm going to leave the heat relatively low. And I'm going to pick up the turner a little bit. And it is starting to break apart into waves, which is what we want. I do want to push this one back down some. And you may or may not have seen that. The cap is blowing bubbles. I'm going to explain this in a second when I turn this off. I'm trying to push some of these down over the bottom a bit. And don't forget to warm the bottom a tiny bit. Okay, so two things. Walk away a second. I'm going to drip just a couple drops of blue into the white. Like literally a couple of drops just to break it back up a tiny bit. you're going to see this. This cup is blowing bubbles. That happens sometimes. This is their older style cup where they still had a cap at the bottom to cover the plug. The newer cups just have that little dot seal. I'll show you. The newer cups don't have a visible cap. They have this seal at the bottom that covers the plug. If your cap blows bubbles, it's just because you've heated it and the air is releasing out of the cap that's in there. It has absolutely nothing to do with the seal of the cup. This seal is still perfectly fine. You just have to keep an eye on the bubbles and keep popping them until it runs out of air to blow out. The resin will seal that and it will stop at some point. I see people all the time say that a cup blew bubbles at the cap and they threw the cup away and the cup was broken. The cup is not broken. It's just something that happens with this style of cup. This is why most tumbler suppliers got away from that style. So don't worry about it if your cup does that. Just keep popping the bubbles. Keep an eye on it until it's done. I'm going to turn this back on a minute just to mix that blue in. Just because I don't want it harsh. I'm going to lift it back up again. I just don't want harsh lines where I dripped. That's all. So, just a couple times around. It's just not moving a ton because I was easy on the epoxy. Alright. So that is it. I'm just going to let it spin and dry. And I will come back when this coat is done. I will probably get the decals on at that point and then give it... This one's probably going to get another 2 coats over top of the decals, because to this point, this is the first coat on this one. But I'm going to keep an eye on those bubbles. I don't see any more coming already. I may have already gotten them all out. So I'm going to get this leveled up and let it do its thing. Okay, so this baby is ready for decal. She looks good. So I'm going to decide where the decals are going to go. I'm not going to put them over the white parts that are major like that. I think I'm going to put like one of them. I have this little weird spot. And I don't really think I want to. I don't know if it'll give a little bubble in the decal or not. I think I'm going to take that as my guide for this. It says not all who wander are lost. Let's see if I can get this off the backing. I have wet white ink on this table that I didn't realize was there. So I'm getting it on the front of this and hopefully none on the back. So I'm actually going to just try and cut that piece off real quick. Just so I don't transfer any white if possible. And then I'm going to clean the table off. There. Hopefully all that's on the back side of this. I mean, I can clean it off the cup if I need to, but I'd rather not need to. Okay, and this is actually navy blue vinyl. I don't know if you can tell that. So I'm going to line up my fingers and spin it around so I have an idea of what center on the back is, somewhere in here. I can see my little line here, and you can see my decal here, so I'm gonna make that my center, and I'm just gonna put a compass on this side. And unless I'm doing a ton of cups that all have to be the same, I just eyeball it. So I'm going to let the decals sit for a little bit, make sure there's no white ink if I have to clean up a little bit. But on this cup, little spots of white aren't really going to be noticeable. But I'm going to let the decals sit a few minutes. I'll come back in and put the clear coat on. Okay, here she is. Watch her come around. Not all who wander are lost. And the compass. And then the bottom. How that ended up. So that is it for this one.